Hi everyone, could we all please get seated? And can I just request everyone to come right in front? Uh, this is uh, this is the workshop part of the discussion, so there is a small cozy group of us here. And in the workshop part of the discussion, we're going to largely uh, talk about peering and interconnection challenges in India, best practices. So you guys have a sense of what's going on and how it's impacting connectivity. I'm going to hand over to Setu uh, from ISOC, who will do an initial opening sort of remarks. Setu, do you have a presentation? Okay.
Hi, good morning everyone. So on behalf of Internet Society and our partners at Medianama, it's my great pleasure to welcome you to the Peering RoadShow India edition. My name is Setu. I'm the Senior Advisor on Policy and Advocacy with Internet Society. Thank you for being here in different capacities that you're here. Since we're running late, I won't take too much of your time. I just wanted to introduce myself and Internet Society. Internet Society is a global nonprofit working to ensure Internet remains force for good, open, connected, trustworthy, secure. We support technical capacity building, promote policies for digital inclusion, and help strengthen the foundation of the Internet through community-led initiatives. This Peering Roadshow is part of our broader effort to support Internet resilience around the world, especially in places where growth in traffic, users, and services demand a stronger local infrastructure. Here in India, we are at a pivotal moment as digital services scale and regional traffic grows. Local interconnection becomes not just a technical priority but a national imperative. So, and on that note, I want to thank again Medianama for organizing this and our partners, Broadband India Forum and Internet Society Delhi chapter. So once again, thank you for joining. Let's get started, and I'll hand it over to Gurshabad.
Thanks so much, Setu. I'm Gurshabad Grover. I'm a technologist, but I also do legal research. I'm slightly familiar with the audience, so I will skip an introduction of the basics of peering, transit, interconnection, internet exchanges, and dive right into it. I will be focusing on interconnection in India, and I think the first thing I want to say is that in the larger space of interconnection, we'll be focusing a lot on IXs today, and this joke/story will become relevant in two places, and it's an old joke about science too. That cool, thanks. There's this drunk man, looking for something under the street light. A cop stops him. Is like, "What are you doing? What are you looking for?" And the drunk person says, "I'm looking for my keys." The cop starts to help this person. "Let me help you." They look for the keys together for a while, and then the cop asks, "Are you sure you dropped your keys here?" And the person says, "Oh no, I dropped them in the park over there. So why are you searching here? There's more light here." And this is, I think, relevant for IXs too, because interconnection is largely voluntary. I mean, since the 1990s and in India too. And most of, historically at least, most of network interconnection has been private peering and transit agreements, and these are largely confidential, right? And when it comes to India, we already have quite a hyper-consolidated space in terms of very few telecom and internet service providers dominating, and they also dominate in terms of international connectivity. And there's a huge volume of traffic in India, but also just to say that, a majority of it actually doesn't flow through the IXs, but since these private peering and transit agreements are not available to us to analyze, what we see, we're under the street light here, which is IXs, because they are multilateral, but they're also the most transparent to us in terms of what networks are interconnecting, what volume of traffic is exchanged there, etc. So I am going first. So let me just say that internet exchanges are still important. This story was just to say that we shouldn't underestimate or overestimate their importance in interconnection. And in India, at least, given the volume of traffic we have and the role that IXPs can play in, just making sure domestic traffic is routed domestically, that it doesn't need to, leave the country before it comes back. Second, decreasing latencies and, quality of service for everyone. So I will focus today on, what will be on everyone's mind. Spoiler alert, TRAI recommendations and license requirements for IXs. But I wanted to cover like the history of how we got here too, through what has happened since 2003 actually. And the current state looks like this. In 2002, this these are IXs in India, but in 2002 this map was basically blank. And now we have like 33 IXs across multiple cities, and the largest one is in Bombay, which has, it lists 447 networks, but I'm guessing there's some duplication there. But so going back to 2003, and again, there are no IXs present, right? And in 2003 is actually when Nixie launches it in 4 cities in India. And TRAI issues a consultation paper called Accelerating Growth of Internet and Broadband Penetration. And they, this is, meant for expanding internet connectivity in India, but they also address the lack of internet exchanges in India, and they focus on Nixie broadly because there are no other IXs. And they were asking questions like, should we mandate interconnection of all networks in India? And they sought comments on, how should we change Nixie's management structure? Should we liberalize some requirements for interconnection, etc.? And just as a signifier of like how far we've come, that TRAI consultation paper had 0 responses. And so if that were issued today, everyone here in the room will be running with their pens and swords. So a good point to also note here is that they actually, the DOT at the time, or DIT at the time, they were actually in favor of mandating interconnection, and TRAI took an opposing view. And the Nixie board also had a view similar to DIT actually. And so at that time, like the context is, there are many smaller ISPs operating. TRAI is like, what if the factor limiting their growth is these high costs of like transit with larger ISPs? As we said, like for a long time, the number of networks that have had international connectivity in India has largely remained the same, right? So this is a factor constant till now. Over time, we've actually seen, hyper consolidation in the domestic market, but that fact remains true. So now TRAI is basically thinking of these smaller ISPs, thinking of Nixie as the solution of expanding internet connectivity in India, because if these domestic ISPs interconnect, then they don't have to enter costly transit agreements with larger ISPs. And they come up with this, XY formula for Nixie, which is that or also called the requester pays formula at Nixie, where basically, unlike other internet exchanges, and unlike most other internet exchanges, they create this formula that if you are transmitting less data of a peered network at Nixie, and they are taking more of your traffic, then you actually have to pay them a fee. And that formula was at Nixie for a long time, and that started in 2003. It started implementation in 2004. Then in 2006 and 7, TRAI begins another consultation process, and now this is basically aimed at improving NIXI's efficiency. So I will highlight this later about like how TRAI's view here has broadly been when it comes to the title of the paper, when it comes to discussing the problem, it's like interconnection. But when their focus has been NIXI and how to improve its efficiency. Whether they've succeeded at it is another question we'll all answer for ourselves. But now they at this time they're thinking of questions whether what they say is all ISPs or their upstream providers can either connect at NIXI nodes or have their own domestic peer link through with a network that connects internationally, which is, I mean, stating the obvious at the time, I think. But they are also thinking of a question that is addressed much later, which is that networks in India, before peering, because the larger networks don't want to lose their powerful position of doing this transit operation for smaller ISPs, they are hesitant to peer at NIXI because they only want domestic traffic to be exchanged at NIXI and not the international one. So at that time, TRAI is also thinking of these questions because the NIXI board is also composed, largely of ISPs that can interconnect, and they basically are recommending that like this segregation is technically possible at IXs, etc. And in 2011, and this is quite important because we should know that licensing requirements are not something that are that should be a surprise to any of us, basically, because they in 2011 the TRAI basically notes the lack of peering agreements between ISPs as again a major roadblock in routing domestic traffic and growth of internet connectivity. And they again, their view was NIXI, so they are noting that there's a vast disparity between how much traffic, internet traffic is generated in India and how much of it is, I mean, the ratio that is routed domestically is quite low. And 2011 is also the year that the idea of mandatory interconnection of networks dies finally in this paper. So notably, of course, they actually recommend a licensing regime for IXPs, mostly with two things in mind. They want to regulate charges and quality standards. They also suggested requiring national level ISPs and international bandwidth providers to interconnect at IXPs and NIXI. So two quick side notes before we come to 2022 and 2025. Three actually. So after 2011 is when the first private IX in India begins operations, which is the DECX in Bombay, and then in 2016, I think Extreme IX launches in 3 cities. Soon after they're embroiled, in a legal dispute about whether, I won't go over the details, but basically now Extreme is put into the position of arguing that actually there was no license agreement. And if you look at the TRAI papers, the consultation papers that I've been mentioning, TRAI itself is admitting that there's no regulatory framework or licensing requirement. So naturally, to fight a legal case saying that there is a legal requirement is a strange development in itself. And also to note, at this point, NIXI itself doesn't have a license to operate these internet exchanges. Then the third and final side note I promise, which is that the 2019 and 2020 is where some of the strange things about NIXI are going away. First, the formula that I mentioned of request to pays that was quite peculiar to NIXI is finally dropped in 2019. And now basically at NIXI, networks are interconnecting at like peering is finally peering. They're connecting at with no hierarchy. There's no need to pay other networks that you're peering with. And second, in 2020, they start non-ISPs to interconnect at Nixie, which is a big advancement because there is no reason to prevent non-ISPs from interconnecting. In fact, it is ideal that with internet service providers, you also have CDNs and other networks that interconnect at Nixie. So why I mention this is because if you go through all these consultation papers, there's one question to think about: how are we regulating interconnection? How does the government view it? How does TRAI view it? Why is Nixie relevant in all of this? Because my hypothesis, and if you disagree, then provocation, but the TRAI and DOT have often looked to Nixie to understand the state of interconnection in India. So all of these consultation papers, they're framed at like interconnection. They're broadly, they're talking about the broad problem, but when it comes down to it, half their recommendations or most of their recommendations are actually towards Nixie. They are looking towards what is quoted in these consultation papers and reports is often Nixie data. And while this may have been true in 2003 when there are no other internet exchanges, Nixie data doesn't present an accurate picture of of network interconnection in India. It doesn't present an accurate picture of even IXs in India because Nixie is operating some of the most low volume IXs in India. So what made complete sense in 2003 doesn't anymore, but at least my impression from reading them, from their language, it seems like that is the lens that the TRAI often takes when looking at network interconnection. Sorry to basically quote one of the people here, but this is from like Anurag Bhatia's blog, which is a simple yet interesting question, right? Like if a server is co-located with, let's say, Nixie Noida, will my server be reachable from all of India, right? And so basically 234 Indian autonomous systems are not visible at the three or four like major Nixie nodes, right? So I will say this: if we hear a complaining tone from TRAI about interconnection in India, it might be signifying of actually Nixie's failure and not of anything else. So it may explain the context of like the why we've arrived where we have, but at least to me, like this historical view reveals two things: that the TRAI, Nixie board, DOT, DAT have had differing views over the years, not only on mandatory interconnection, but of like licensing, etc. And Nixie, which is understandably a very minor player in interconnection in India now, is sometimes the lens they look at interconnection through. So, and now we know what's happened in the last 3 years, where the TRAI has recommended a separate authorization for IXPs in India in the unified license framework, and they basically recommended that all IXPs, including Nixie, should be brought under this framework, and Nixie obtained a national level ISP license in December 2024, so not too long ago. And I will mention like two other things that sort of motivate this view, right? Like we discussed, basically, to TRAI and DOT, Nixie is the street light, right? And I'm not calling them drunk, but I'm just a parallel. And if we are the cops in this analogy, like we know that, at least to me, again, I'm not like some sort of like market libertarian, but it's important to ask why require certain things if there was no intervention needed. In my opinion, no intervention was needed because private IXs were growing much faster than Nixie, doing their job better than Nixie, I hope. And if it's fair to say that the government did not succeed at making Nixie, the most successful thing. The light got dimmer and dimmer, and they want to expand the light now. So that's why we may have like licensing agreements. I will also mention that we will see this peculiar thing in the consultation paper too, and the requirements that things like in the interest of national security or public interest, the licensee shall block URLs or websites, etc., which honestly the IXs don't need to do, right? Like these orders are already passed to ISPs. Regardless of your view on internet censorship in India, IXs do not need to do this. They rarely function in even examining traffic at that level in the first place. So here the context is also that Nixie has been used in this way in the past, not in its role as an internet exchange point, but in its role as the IN registry. It has been asked to block or deregister domain names in the past. So to me, I feel like there's this tendency to control that has not been controlled, but the rationale of why this control needs to be exerted is not very clear to me. And I think from what we've seen, if we were to anticipate what the fallouts of this will be, IFON had done an interview with Medianama, and they're basically implying that if onerous requirements come or if any legal challenges come, they'll be forced to shut down. And this is a community internet exchange. And another IX I know, but I don't know if I can name, was also thinking of basically shutting down operations after because these requirements can be onerous depending on the size, whether you're backed by a large company or not, etc. But I just do research. I'm also very interested in hearing everyone's, especially if you're an ISP or IXP, how these requirements will, affect your operations and what you'd like to see change. But as I said, IXs are just a narrow part of the interconnection problem. If people feel at liberty here, I would love to also learn. I would love to learn more about what kind of private transit peering agreements these networks also have. So, thank you.